I suspect most of us have been to Mayday Farm in Thetford Forest. If you follow the Goshawk Trail south to the point where you would normally turn east, you're at a crossroads in the tracks. On the southwest side of that crossroads, there has always been a small man-made pool where birds come to drink and bathe. With a diet of seeds, there are often large groups of finches which come down en masse. Normally surrounded by shrubs, these birds have been almost impossible to see. But last year someone had cleared the shrubs away, making access much easier. We were already seeing paler redpolls, pushing thoughts of lesser and mealies into our heads, but more of that later. There were plenty of siskins too. Perhaps more exciting was this female crossbill. The only male that came down kept very well hidden. Hoping to get better film of a male, I returned about a week later. Thankfully, the throng of redpolls and siskins were still drinking there. Some were more acrobatic than others. I thought this was a good opportunity to get to grips with identification points, starting with male siskins, which are relatively easy. They have glorious yellow, green and black plumage with a strong wing bar. There is a distinctive black crown and bib. The black on the crown and bib is less solid on this bird, and the back streakier, perhaps indicating a maturing youngster. Females and juveniles are less colourful, plainer and streakier, but still with a strong wing bar. Feeding up in an older tree, in poor light, they can look very similar to a redpoll. But they are a little smaller, with no black facial markings. If you can see any colour, they are greener, with no red crown. Redpolls have black facial markings, and usually a red cap, though the bird on the right lacks this feature. A year ago, the overall chestnut brown colouring, particularly on the back, would have told me this was a female lesser redpoll. As are these, with streaky chestnut flanks. And again, a little paler, but still the same bird. In contrast, males have a lovely pink chest. Which can vary in extent and shade. And this individual seems to have some pink on the rump. And now the fun starts, as a larger, paler, greyer bird comes into view. Again, a year ago, I would have called this a common or mealy redpoll. I don't want to go into great detail, but up until 2018 there has been 4 different bodies compiling checklists of birds based on taxonomical and morphological studies, but coming to different conclusions. Combining forces, a new DVI list is being developed. Last year this concluded that lesser, mealy and even Arctic redpolls are all the same bird, not even subspecies. However, this could change. And, as you have seen, these paler birds look very different. Males have the lovely pink chest again. This bird is a little browner, perhaps an intermediate, so maybe they have a point. And at last a crossbill, but no males. However, if you remember, there used to be a screen hide at the top of the Goshawk Trail. Long gone, there are still some birch trees by a few small ponds. Crossbills were gathering here to drink. Males as well as females. The males showing varying shades of orange. The light was poor on the other side of the trees, but that was where they were coming down to drink. Continuing the orange theme, you might think this is an exotic foreign damselfly. However, the dragonfly enthusiasts amongst you will recognise the holy grail of damselflies breeding in Britain, the immature female scarce blue-tailed damselfly. The gorgeous colours of this Aurantiaca phase will only last a week or so. Scarce bluetails start to emerge from their larvae at the end of May or beginning of June, and this, in my opinion, is the best time to look for Aurantiaca, even though the flight season lasts through to early September. Despite the bright colours, it is an enigmatic phase, which only the lucky or persistent will find. As the name suggests, this is a rare damsel in the UK, localised due to its habitat requirements. The colony near us is miles from its accepted range, perhaps indicating how good they are at dispersing once the habitat becomes overgrown and unsuitable. Our local site is grazed by ponies and contains variable amounts of vegetation. Areas with more vegetation can be good places to look for Aurantiaca. However, the warmth that open shallow water provides is thought to be important, even in transient sites, which will become too overgrown. A mature female is far less eye-catching, with cryptic green and black colouring. Transitional phases are obviously required to complete the transformation from the bright youngster. Here, the hint of green on the abdomen has crept onto the thorax. In this example, the only orange left is in the eye spots. Females going through this colour change might already be pursued by males with mating in mind. It is not known whether she can store sperm until her eggs mature. It is more usual, of course, to find mature females mating. They adopt the wheel position, which, as we saw with the white-faced darters, is common and unique to both dragons and damsels. The mechanics of this position are fascinating, but perhaps best for another occasion. You will have noticed that males are totally different in appearance to females, with blue and black colouring. There is a bright blue triangular eye spot behind each eye and two narrow blue shoulder stripes on top of the thorax. The classic young male has a greener thorax. Only the males have the blue tail, which is closer to the tip of the abdomen than it is on the more common blue-tailed damselfly. The scarce bluetail has blue covering all of segment 9, only spinning onto segment 8. On the larger blue-tailed damselfly, the blue neatly covers the whole of segment 8. This is the easiest way to distinguish the two. Dragons and damsels are carnivorous, and, in general, scarce bluetails take smaller prey. However, this individual caught one of the moths flying around it, consuming the feast with a certain rapidity. And this male couldn't resist the bugs on this dead stem. The larger blue-tailed damselfly is notorious for taking larger prey. Sadly, this one appears to be tucking into a newly emerged scarce bluetail. We had heard that there were waxwings at Wifton. On arrival, we joined a growing crowd of birders at the service entrance to the pub. The waxwings were in the trees opposite. Blackbirds and a missel thrush were already helping themselves to the berries on a large bush overhanging the pub's storerooms. When the waxwings did come down, several sat at the top of the bush initially. There were about a dozen birds, and they quickly filtered down through the shrub. It turned into a bit of a smash and grab raid as they fed voraciously. I've left the soundtrack pretty much as it was, with the clicking of cameras omnipresent. In a flash it was all over. They retired back across the road to preen and digest the food they had bolted down. After half an hour or so, they returned to the berries. This one had discovered that the overhead cables were less inclined to move in the strong wind. This provided a great opportunity for all the photographers, including myself. It was another smash and grab raid, lasting only a minute or two. This time they flew to some pine trees on the other side of the village green. They were very active, seeming to catch insects. I've since found that during the summer months, back home in the spruce forests of northern Sweden, they are indeed flycatchers. The activity abated and we returned to the pub. The backswings were already there. The cycle of gorging for a couple of minutes, followed by resting, continued through the afternoon. I stayed on to get more footage. The wind had strengthened, and birds perching on the overhead cables were struggling now. This one seemed a little more relaxed, feeding calmly for a minute or so. And I love their trilling call, not unlike the tinkling of bells. The rest of the clips are birds feeding. They can be quite acrobatic. And finishing with a couple of slow motion clips, which will bring us on to the slow motion section of the talk. We've all watched avocets feed, swishing that thin upturned beak to and fro in the water. But I've always found it impossible to see what they actually eat. I was hoping my new camera with a slow motion facility would reveal all. But I'm still struggling here. They just seem to be swallowing muddy water. Anything of any real substance is dropped. At least the bird on the right eats something visible here. On the same day, these black-tailed godwits were probing for prey more easily seen. On a return visit in June, this avocet was still on eggs, perhaps a second attempt after an unsuccessful first try. Other birds had chicks, and, in their usual way, were being overprotective. While staying wary of their mother, these mallard ducklings were pursued relentlessly. Then 2 birds were ganging up on them, still showing some respect to the mother. Some real-time footage shows just how persistent they were. Back to feeding techniques. The young avocets were using a different method to their parents. Walking the mud and taking more obvious prey from the surface. A couple of months later, a black-winged stilt was on the far side of the freshwater marsh. To put it crudely, an avocet with pink legs and a straight beak. At the water's edge, the feeding technique was the same as the young avocets, picking up single items of more obvious prey. However, once in slightly deeper water, it used a similar technique to the adult avocets, still taking larger prey perhaps. It was a sunny day, giving sharper images. Maybe if I got closer and slowed the clips further in the editing. I'm still just seeing muddy water being eaten. Perhaps a small worm in the beak here, but it doesn't seem to get swallowed. In desperation, I turned to Google. It refers to the RSPB, saying avocets eat aquatic invertebrates such as insects, worms and crustaceans, including mollusks and amphipods. All I can think is that these items must be very small. The purple emperor is our largest and most exotic butterfly. Thankfully, it is one of the few increasing its range and population. Like these commas, they have a reputation for feeding on unsavoury objects. This one was simply probing for minerals on the stony track. If the light is right, males have an iridescent purple-blue sheen to the upper surface of their wings. If the light isn't reflecting correctly, the appearance is just brown and white. Through movement, I was hoping to capture the transition in slow motion. I don't think I really got what I was after, but here's a few clips anyway. This last clip probably shows the changing colour best. Houghton Mill is probably our closest site for the white-legged damselfly. This is an adult male. Looking at the back legs of this paler young male, you can see why more recently it has been given the name blue featherleg. Banded demoiselles are also present, and you will see them flitting like butterflies beside many of our rivers and streams. The shiny males have dark blue patches on all four wings. Females are also shiny, but much greener in appearance. They lack the deep blue patches in their wings and could be mistaken for a completely different species. Demoiselles are large damsels and are generally not seen as prey by medium-sized dragons such as this scarce chaser. They often flick their wings, and this can be a display or part of a defense mechanism. I was wanting to capture this in slow motion. In this head-on view, the wings are held open for quite a long period, but the blue patches don't show particularly well. This side view shows the patches better. Just like a spotted flycatcher, a demoiselle will use a favourite perch to fly from, catch its prey, and return to eat it. On reflection, this return flight and landing features the wing patches better than the previous clips, so I've included a few examples. I love the way the mouth parts look like fangs. In this clip, the legs are dangling down, suggesting that they've been used as a net to catch the prey, or to help manoeuvre it into the mouth parts. I was lucky to have a demoiselle at my garden pond for a couple of days earlier this year. Here he catches a spider, using his legs to help secure his prey. We made a short trip to Cumbria this summer to look for our rarest butterfly, the high-brown fritillary. Bizarrely, we found them nectaring on buddleia like any other butterfly. On the same shrubs were a couple of hummingbird hawk moths. They are described as frequent immigrants, breeding in southern Europe and North Africa. And I suspect most of us have seen them in our gardens. They have overwintered in the southwest for the last 30 years or so. Looking exactly like small hummingbirds, it's obvious how they derived their name. Earlier in the year, we went to Lincolnshire for marsh fritillaries. They were introduced into some meadows within the woodland some years ago. I was also hoping to see this insect, which is very similar in size and shape to the hummingbird hawk moth. It's a broad-bordered bee hawk moth. A resident species, Norfolk, surprisingly, is one of its strongholds, Thetford Forest in particular. I say surprisingly, as I've only seen one here in 40 years. Wild honeysuckle is the larval food plant. And this one was nectaring on ragged robin. They are described as nationally scarce, occurring locally in southern Britain as far north as Yorkshire. Unlike the hummingbird hawk moth, the wings are transparent, with a broad reddish border, hence the name. I couldn't find the obligatory sunset, but this sums up what I'm trying to say.